We live in a time where masculinity is shamed and men don't know what it means to be a man. As a pastor and counselor, I've spent the better part of my life equipping and training others. My goal with this show is to translate my hard-earned experience into tools and tactics to help you become stronger as a man. This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Vellet. Welcome back, BraveCo men, to the BraveCo podcast. This week, I have an incredible man on. His name is Gene McConnell. He has one of the craziest stories that I've heard, and I did a event with him this last year for, gosh, who was that for? It was for
Exodus Cry.
Benji Nola.
Yeah,
Exodus Cry. That's right. And man, it was just so powerful. When Gene shared his story, right away I thought I got to get him on the BraveCo podcast. But Gene's an incredible man. He has an organization called Authentic Manhood Initiative. Authentic Relationships International. Sorry,
that's okay.
And just so much resources and wisdom coming out of him. But Gene, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm really excited for everyone to hear your story and your wisdom. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jason. It's an honor to be a part of helping you have impact for the men you're reaching and working with.
Yeah, thanks. Gene, I want to dive in just right away. We're gonna go deep into Gene's story, which is a story of brokenness and sexual addiction, and you've just become an expert on the subject, traveling around, speaking all over, and helping hundreds, if not thousands, of men and women break free. But before we dive into how to get free and the all that stuff, let's go back into your story. How did you grow up? How did you get introduced into pornography and sexual addiction?
Well, I'm a preacher's kid, so I was born going to church. So every time the doors were open, I was there. So that meant at least 4 to 5 times a week I was in church settings.
Yeah.
And so very young in life, I accepted Christ at 9. I knew that God had put a call on my heart, but my parents were pastors, my grandparents were pastors, my great grandparents were pastors, my uncle and aunt are pastors. So I grew up in not only church but church leadership. So there was a lot of things that go on behind the scenes in terms of tools, understanding what it cost, all of that, and I knew very young that I wanted to have impact. So my walk with the Lord, I memorized scripture young, very young, and I would play those little guitars with the plastic strings, when I was a little kid, sing on the corner. I did a whole lot of that in young life. But at the age of 6, was a significant thing that happened to me. I was sexually abused by a babysitter, and the babysitter was about 6 or 7 years older than me. And my dad was because my dad was a pastor, he was a very busy guy, and he didn't have the time that I longed for. I was a very hungry kid. I really loved my dad, respected my dad, and wanted to get to know my dad even more. And yet, the people that were in church were getting more attention. It just required a lot because he was a roofing contractor during the day and a pastor at night and weekends. So I was hungry. I was hungry for attention and affirmation. Here's this babysitter who said, I like you. You're important. I care about you. You're handsome. All those kind of kind words. And with that came sex. And I didn't know at the time what the heck was going on. All I knew was that the attention felt good. So what my first sexual experience at the age of 6 was pleasure and shame in the same experience. So pleasure in the sense of I felt like I was wanted, I felt like I was needed, I felt like I was important to someone. / I felt dirty, I felt soiled, I felt damaged, I felt like I was broken. And I couldn't put language to it at 6. There's no way to even understand what the heck just happened. And that
Mm.
happened for a long period of time. I don't have the years of time. It just happened a lot. All the memories blur together. And then going
Wow.
through church, keep in mind now, I said at the beginning that I'm in church a lot. So I'm at church. I'm running at the altar at 6 years old, crying out, God, and I'm thinking I am that dirty little boy, and because what was a hook in that, and this is really important to make the point, just to start us out as my story goes,
Yeah.
is that the because my body responded to something so shameful and so dirty, that somehow I thought I am that. I am dirty. I am broken because anybody that's healthy wouldn't respond to something so wrong. And so, because my body responded, and because I didn't tell anybody, and because I kept it secret, that I thought I was the contributor. I was the one that was doing this. And so I believed very early that I was too broken, too dirty to be loved. It's a core thing that happened at the age of 6. And so I would run down to the altar at 6, 7, 8 years old, crying out for God to cleanse me, heal me, free me, but never could get the picture of how to get that dirty stain off of my world. Off of
Wow.
so at the age of 9, there was a young man that was brought into our home. His parents were going through a really tough time, so my parents brought him in, and he moved into our house for a while, and he began to molest me as well. And so now I these the struggle with this is that what do I got this neon sign on my forehead says here I am, molest me.
Yeah.
And the truth was, is I was just hungry for attention. This guy he was 5, 6 years older than I was, and he was like a dad to me. I mean, he helped me beat up my bullies. We rode bikes together, we skateboarded together, played ball together. And so the reality was, is that I was longing for connection, for male connection, but this guy took that vulnerability and used it for his own purposes. Now I understand that, but then I did not. And I thought, well, and the struggle with it again is, why didn't I tell somebody? Why am I hiding this? Why am I allowing it to happen
Yeah.
again? Why am I involved in it? And why is there pleasure connected to something so wrong? And so I was twisted and turned inside, both emotionally and actually mentally. And at the age of 12, my first exposure to pornography was at a elder's house who was a relative, but he was a leader, church leader, worship leader, counselor. And I was playing army at his house, and I snuck into the shed to hide. And there was this 200 to 300 pornography magazines. And
Wow.
to this day, I did that very first image of it, opening that up and the impact that that had on me, both, and it felt exactly the same as that first sexual experience where there's pleasure. Wow, look at this. Oh my gosh. Wow, beautiful. All that kind of stuff. Slash feeling dirty, soiled, ugly. I know this is wrong. I felt like you could use the word perversion. Although what I didn't have that language, but it would have felt like. And so the idea then is this, I knew there was shame introduced because I wouldn't tell anybody. Shame, the fruit of
Yeah.
shame is hiding. So I couldn't tell anybody. And so I kept it secret. And that started this whole journey of going to pornography, learning from the imagery, start reading the stories, consuming everything I could get my hands on. Now, keep in mind, slash being in church 4 or 5 times a week, hearing God speak to
Did
my
you
heart. Good.
did you steal those guys' magazines or
What I did was is that we have several ways it came. So I would go into a grocery store, and I would, back in the day they had it behind an adult section or an adult part, and so you couldn't get to it. But I would find a way to steal it, or I would find one of my friends' parents' dad was consuming, and they'd have a man. I'd steal a magazine, or I'd take a couple pictures out of it, and then what we call
yeah.
the spillover effect, which is I'd find it in a trash can, or I'd find it in a alleyway, or
Yep.
a ditch. So pornography wasn't available back in the wagon days.
Yep,
uh,
it wasn't,
Back in
man.
the 60s, what pornography was not available like it is today online and
It's true.
phone. So it was something you had to pursue or seek out. So I knew something was wrong when I was consuming because of what it did to my young heart of wanting to be like God, wanted to pursue God, and wanted to have impact there. That I saw my heart start to turn and my thinking turn. So I started having fantasies and thoughts that I would never have allowed before. And the thinking was beginning to shift because I would see these images, whether women, things that I won't even get into that were twisted, wrong, unhealthy, demeaning, objectifying, obviously. So all of
Yeah.
that is beginning to affect how I see women and also how I see sex, how I encounter women. There's several studies out there showing that early exposure to pornography has the same impact as sexual abuse. So why? Because
Mhm.
it wounds the ability to see in a healthy light women,
Mhm.
relationships, sex. So I
Wow.
might not physically have harm by viewing, but it damages how I see and how I treat and how I treat myself. And so so thinking about it, my first experience to relationship with a woman was sexual abuse, and then pornography was like fuel on the fire. Pornography
Mhm.
was my education. So from about 12 to 16, I became an avid consumer of porn, and I get everywhere I could get my hands on it, I would. And but then at the same time, knowing that I would cry, run down to the altar. God, I don't want this in my life. This is wrong. I know it's wrong. I'll never do it again. And it might be a week, 2 weeks, sometimes 6 months, but I would ultimately be back in that same hole that I said I would never go. And the amount of shame, embarrassment, pain, that of knowing you're doing something that goes against the very heart that you have inside, and to know that if anybody saw what I was doing, they would see me as disgusting. They would throw me out because everybody saw me as a kid that was alive for God. I had memorized scripture. I was speaking in different settings at the age of 9, 10, 12. I mean, for me to think that those people would see me any different than what they were seeing me there just scared the heck out of me. And so
Yeah.
I did a really good job of lying and pretending and stuffing and never letting anybody connect the two of what I was doing and how I lived my life behind the scenes. So I learned at a very early age how to live two different lives. One in front of church, raise my hands, say the right words, do the right things, make sacrifices, be the good guy. But behind the scenes, totally different fantasies, masturbation, consuming, treating my dates like a piece of meat. Like I just all I'm looking for
Mhm.
is to get to home base, kind of thing, which was so demeaning. And think about it back. I can't believe that I carried that kind of thinking. Um, so at 16, I had a profound experience where uh, I won't. Well, I will. We just need to do it. So they I was coming home. I was a wrestler in high school, and I didn't have a car the earlier parts of the high school, and so I was hitchhiking home, and I got a ride to about a mile away from my house, and so the last mile I was walking, and as I was walking, this a car drove by, and as it drove by, it threw this book out the window into the ditch, and it was about I don't know a couple hundred yards in front of me, and so I walked over to where it was, and I opened up that book, and it was I don't remember the title name, but it was something like playing with little sis. And what it did was it was teaching ideas and scenarios of how sister relationship helps you learn about sex, and that what you like and what you don't like, and set up how to set up
Wow.
encounters. And when I so at 16, now my sister, who was 2 years younger than me, was 14, and we did everything together. We rode horses together. Well, I dated her girlfriend. She dated my boyfriends. We were best friends. And so for me to cross that line, um, even to this day, that still breaks my heart because it violated everything that I knew was right inside of my own soul.
Yeah.
And even there's no way to discount it. It was wrong no matter what, but there was no actual sex, but it was enough to violate the boundaries of what a brother sister relationship was going to be and should be. And so I just went down to the altar and I said, God, I mean this with everything in me. I'm going to turn this around and I'm going to demonstrate it. So I went to Bible college. That was right at that time. So I graduated out of high school and then I went to Bible college. And in Bible college, I met a woman, got married. They were in Bible college. Man, for 6 years, from 16 to 21, photoclean, didn't touch porn, didn't do nothing. I thought I had beaten this thing. I was totally in. I went to Bible college and then I went into a pastor's. They were to pioneer churches, so I was literally in this program to go and start a work. And so I was like 6 months from starting a work when things kind of broke in a way that I never anticipated. My wife was 6 months pregnant, and when she woke up one night in the middle of the night just screaming and crying and shaking and sweating in fetal wall position. And I tried to hug her and she pushed me away. I tried to cuddle and she just wouldn't let me touch her, wouldn't let me get close to her. So the next day I come up from behind her to give her a hug and she stiffened up and I gave her a kiss and she wiped it off. And boy,
Wow.
the thing was, is I'm going, man, without talking to her because she wouldn't talk to me. I didn't know what was going on inside of her. But inside, you know where I went with that? I said, man, she
Yeah.
must see that dirty little boy. She must see something. Somehow I let her into that. Somehow she sees that broken guy. And I freaked out. And when I found out later that her early childhood memories of sexual abuse, the baby was triggering those, and the baby was moving
Oh,
at six
wow.
months. So she was reliving memories, but I didn't know that. I thought it was me, and so there's no excuse, absolutely none. So I said, fine, if you're not going to meet my needs and you're not going to let me in, I'm doing this myself. And so I stepped back into the world of pornography, but now I'm of age. So now it's not just a magazine anymore. I can go to a strip club. I can go to a massage parlor. I can go to a prostitute. I can go where I can actually put money towards something live. And live was like a pornography on steroids. And so it took me right back into the cycle. Now, keep in mind when I started back into that I'm assisting in pastoring someone. I'm assistant pastor. I'm a men's
Yeah.
pastor. And so I'm in front of people and I'm speaking, I'm talking, I'm interacting, and people are coming to me for counsel. And they had no idea that the life I was living behind closed doors was the life I was living, or that they anticipated that my life was different in front of them as I was in front of them. And the pain of talking to someone with that fear sitting right behind that conversation going, if they only knew. If they knew that I was going to clubs, if they knew that I was paying for prostitutes, they knew that I was living this dual life, how would they see it? And the shame of that, I would literally run to the altar, and very few times, but I did. I'd go to a brother and I'd say, I'm struggling with lust. Nobody asked me what that meant. I don't think anybody wanted to have that conversation because
Yeah.
if they have that conversation, they're going to get confronted themselves, right? So nobody's going to
Yeah.
have that conversation. And I wasn't about to tell them what that meant. I wasn't going to give any descriptors to that. I just simply said lust. And so this thing progressed in me like crazy. And from 21 to 29, I frequented clubs on a regular basis. And I was making a lot of money, so I spent a lot of money. And I, so in the clubs to realize just how bad this was for me is that, my thinking was that whatever I wanted, I could have. It just meant how much money I spent.
Mm.
And so if I wanted something that the average person or my wife wouldn't consider, then I just got to up the ante financially. And so when I think about that, it is that she is someone I can purchase. She's a commodity. She is someone that the more money I pay, the better I get. And the idea
Mm.
is that I know this sounds really crazy and it breaks my heart to even come out of my own mouth at this point. But the reality is I didn't see her anything more than just a piece of meat, a commodity, somebody that I could use and I could throw away. I can walk away with no regrets. After all, I paid money. And
Yeah.
so to realize that I'd gone that far with that thinking and how depraved and deprived that was, it was crazy. So as addictions progress, and they always do, you never stay the same. Um, and so the addiction progressed, and or digressed, whatever you want, whatever language you want to use.
Yeah.
But it got to a point where, for many years, I gravitated towards rape fantasy, and I'd watch Hollywood movies. In fact, my earlier years of exposure, some of my first exposures to porn were women being. Now I'm going to get into it. Just the rape fantasy stuff, and so the pain of that at the first really drove me crazy because Lord, I can't believe I'm doing this. But at the time at 29, I am pretty much fully involved in church and fully engaged in the fantasies, dreaming that somehow, maybe someday, there will be an opportunity to fulfill that in the right spot, right place, maybe money, whatever it takes. And so one night, I pulled into a racquetball club in the back parking lot. It was full. And as I was getting out of the car to go play, this woman walks by, and this something inside goes, there she is. This is something snapped
Mm.
inside and said, this is your opportunity. She fits everything you've been fantasizing about. You're in the back of this parking lot. There is nobody back here. Here's your opportunity. And I walked to her car, followed her, and she sat down in her car. I said, excuse me. And where's what? Do you know where Walmart is? Kind of start the ball rolling. And so she answered me. And then I forced my way into that car with put my hands around her throat with a full intent to rape. And she asked me, what was I going to do? And I told her I told her that what I was going to do, and the fear in her eyes, Jason, um, pure fear. And it was like somebody just slapped me across the face and said, wake up, you're about to destroy another human being's life. Don't you get it? She doesn't want this. She is scared spitless. And it's like it woke me up. And I said, excuse me, I've made a serious mistake here. I let her go, walked to my own
Mm.
car, got in my car, and she got my license plates. I wasn't even thinking from there. I was in just dilemma and heart. I was just stirring inside, like, what the, excuse me, but what the hell did I just do?
Yeah.
And, so I got in my car, she got my license plates and turned me in. Well, that started the whole process of getting caught, exposed, and everything that happened from there. Look, I get the fact that what I did was wrong and deserves to be punished. There's no question in my mind, and needed that. There's no question. But the way the church handled me was they threw me out, no restoration process. Like the 12 elders, what I call the Hall of Shame, they just literally destroyed me. And
Wow.
so they said, you can't come back. You can't come here and you can't call anybody. So in one moment, literally everybody calling me, seeking for counsel or to spend time with me, and just a snap of a finger, it's the opposite. Total isolation, no one to talk to.
Wow.
And so I walked away from that elders meeting and I said, I'll never walk back into a church ever again. I'm done. Now, obviously, it's not their fault. They were hurt. They reacted wrong, obviously, but uh, it just gave me an excuse, quite frankly, to just live even worse. For the next year, I was just I don't even know how I lived. I can't. If I went into the scenarios, you just go, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're still alive." So it was so bad. And one day, out of the blue, um, a guy who had been kind of my accountability guy over the years, who I'd lied to every time, basically about my life, but he was somebody who really cared about me, and he lived about 3 hours away. He was a pastor of a church in Tustin area, California, and he said, "Hey, I haven't seen you in a long time. Why don't you come down and see me?" It was a 3 hour drive. I lived in Lancaster, California, and he lived in Tustin. So I said, "No, I'm not coming." I'm thinking, man, he's the last person in the world I want to know, because he's my only friend left. I really don't have anybody else in my
Wow.
life. And he just wouldn't take no for an answer. So I finally agreed. And so I'm driving the 3 hours, thinking I'm going to talk about the weather. I'll talk about the Dodgers. I'm trying to think of a list of things so to keep the conversation going without it ever going, because he had no idea what had happened. He was too far away,
Wow.
and so all he knew is we hadn't talked in a year. So anyhow, I get down in his office and I sit down, and we're interacting maybe 3 or 4 minutes. I'm not sure about the time, and I just literally vomited all that out. We were probably there 2 to 3 hours minimum, because I didn't hold back. I just
Wow.
literally let it go. And when I did that, Jason, um, I finally got it all out, and he's sitting behind his desk, and he's between me and the doorway. There's no way out of this office except for through him. And now he stands up and he's coming towards me. And I don't know what he's going to do. I really don't. I actually am thinking that he's going to do like everybody else has, right? And so I stand up with my fist clenched beside me, and I'm ready to deck him if he does anything that is painful. And what he did just blew me away. He just put his arms around me in a wrestler's hug, and he just pulled me in. And it's not one of those little like limp hugs. He pulled me in like he was wrestling me, and he had me as tight as I can
Wow.
even imagine. And he laid his head on my shoulder, and he began to weep.
Wow.
And I've been in church all my life, 29 years to that point. I never tasted what the heck he was doing to me right at that moment. I didn't know what he did. It's like he breathed life into my soul.
Wow.
And he said, "I'm so sorry that you've tasted so much pain, and you have not tasted God's love for you. I'm here to walk this out. We're going to get out of this. You're his son, and we're going to get out of this. I'm going to be here to walk it out with you." And he had a large church, so he wasn't an easy guy to get to. So for him to say, I'm once a week, come down for 2 hours and hang with me, he was
Wow.
it was just an amazing, incredible um, thing. But what he did for me, what I realized today, actually is why I'm even sitting here today, Jason. He wasn't the magical healer, or he wasn't the wise counselor. He just knew how to love. And he put life into me. He actually said to me, and this is in the language that we've talked and unpacked later from this event I talked with him. He said, "I see who you are. You're his son. You're God's son. That stuff you're doing is all, yeah, I see that, and it's wrong, and I'm not denying it, and I'm not pushing it aside. But I want you to know that you have value still sitting there, and that God wants to embrace and forgive and redeem.
Wow.
And what you're doing ain't you." And everybody else in the world was saying, "You're a pervert, you're a scumbag, you're a perpetrator. Once an addict, always an addict. You're just going to live in suspicion for the rest of your life, and you're only one step away from failing." All that kind of crap that keeps you locked in to the
Yeah.
mess, because we think that that's our identity. And boy, what he gave me just changed my world. It did. There is no way. I had a lot of work to do. Let me tell you, there's no quick fixes here. But what he did was he gave me the life to fight. Is what he did.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow. What a crazy story. Just real quick, Gene, like, how did you get out? How did you get all the way out?
I would, Jason, it's a journey, and the journey is understanding that your behaviors are just fruits.
Yeah.
They're not the real deal. Your behaviors is your way of trying to manage the real problem. So your behaviors are
Right.
you're just a symptom. And so finding people who helped me, first of all, I went to someone who dealt with sexual trauma. So, because I had no idea how sexual trauma played a role in my consumption of porn, and wow, that was, sex on steroids for me. So there was sexual abuse. So I went to Jan Frank, who wrote the book Adore Hope, and she played a profound
Oh.
impact on my life. First, went to her conferences, read her books, did some counseling, and then I went to a guy who was a sex addict specialist, they called it sexual dysfunction disorders as well as addiction. He's in California as well, and his name was Ray Jones. And I spent almost 3 years, almost 4 years actually, with him, working on the thinking aspect. And then I did a Gordon Dalby for the male wound, for healing the masculine soul, because there
Mhm.
was a lot of wounding I carried. So what I'm getting to is there's not just one thing that drives this, but it's all underneath the surface. Every bit of it
Yeah.
is. So discovering what it is that drives that behavior. So you look at the root systems, and so healing and change begin to happen over a season of time. And having a safe community where I could go and say, hey, if I'm Jason, I'm falling, I'm struggling with this. Help me out. Give me some support. What can I do? And so getting the support to be able to go, and the key in this whole thing, and if I was to say there's one key, Jason,
Yeah.
and there's a ton of other ones that come on top of it, but this one absolutely is core. It is that I want to be a person of the light. I want to walk in the light, not confessional, where I come to you and I confess my sins and then I go and live something else and then come back and confess my sins. That that if I'm going to walk with the God of light as He is in the light, then I have fellowship. So God's fellowship, connection, relationship in the light is what changes this, because it gives me the
Yeah.
energy. It gives me the energy. It doesn't change the dynamics in the sense that I still have struggles, but it gives me the energy to fight those struggles. It gives me the energy to grow and change it. So I need the energy, but I can't ever have the energy as long as I'm in shame, saying, if I share this, it will be the end of me. If I share this, it
Yeah.
will kill me. So I can't really taste acceptance or love or forgiveness or kindness or healing when I'm in the darkness. So the enemy is the prince of darkness, and he operates in darkness, so he comes to rob, steal, and destroy. If I want to heal, I've got to be someone who says, no more hiding. You can't heal what you hide.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah. That's so true.
that's why we need each other, Jason. That's why we need community, because I need other men in my life to walk alongside of me, not just to hear my debris and my messes, but to celebrate life, to do life together. And in the doing life together, it isn't just about small group. It's about doing life together. Small group facilitates relationships. It teaches me how to have honest and open relationship, but I need relationship to taste God, to taste God's arms, to taste God's forgiveness, to see myself through the lens of another person so I can actually see my value, my true value. So I need community. So it's community for life.
Gene, what do you say to the guy who's, well, maybe I should ask this question. How does a guy know that he's actually struggling with a sexual addiction? And then where's the first place to start? Like, cause there'll be a whole bunch of guys listening to this, and some guys, are like, I don't know if I have a sexual addiction or not. Like, can you just unpack that a little bit?
Sure. So one of the number one indicators is that when you have said no to something, you're not going to do it, and then you go back to it. That's an indicator that there's something beyond your control. That's what addiction really is you're saying, I don't want to do that, but here I am again. This violates my whole dignity. It violates who I am as a man, but here I am again. And the idea, and there's this cycle of, man, God, I mean it with all my heart this time. I'm doubling down. I'm going to read your word. I'm going to get in fellowship. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And then it's 2 weeks later, I'm back in the same hellhole again. So the reality is that addiction can wait 6 months. You know what I mean? I can white knuckle it for six
Yeah.
months, but the reality of it is addiction is far, has much, let me back up. There's a reason why addiction exists in us because it's a way we're trying to meet needs that we're not meeting in a real way or in a healthy way.
Yeah.
So there's two primary drivers to addiction. One is unmet needs. So I don't know how to meet real needs and I'm going to sex as a way to cope. So I'm using sex as a way to meet that need. And secondly is I'm covering unresolved wounds, things that I've been hurt in the past. I'm carrying them. I've stuffed them. They're still hitting me. They still hurt. And so I'm using the drug, pornography, mood altering when you consume. So the mood, I see pornography as a way to take me out of the pain in a moment. But as it takes me out of the pain still sits there when it's done. And only worse because I just violated my boundaries again about never going there. So addiction is something that you have to be honest about. Do I really have control? Can I really walk away from this? Second part of that is I don't care if it's an addiction or not. Just the fact that we are even casually consuming. And I mean casually, it could be that you're on Facebook and you see these images come across, or you're on Instagram and somehow you get these things that pop up, or you get a spam email, or you're coming across imagery that's designed to move us. And what are you doing with that image? You just stop it? Because it the key in that whole piece is we live in a culture that is toxic. We need each other, brothers, to be able to talk about what we're seeing and the impact that it's having on my thinking, and not be afraid of how they're going to handle me. So it's a
Mhm.
no shame zone for in relationships, so that people don't beat you up. They come alongside of you and support you and help you heal. So number one step would be to find, there are two parts to that. Either find a counselor. The scripture calls it an elder. That is somebody who has a workable knowledge of the things you're struggling with. So take a step to find somebody who's been there, done this, and has a way and understands what it takes to get out. So that there's somebody not in the ditch with you. You need that.
Yeah.
You need somebody that's not in the ditch with you. So go into a group where there's a bunch of guys in the same struggle. That's important. It's camaraderie, but you're all in the same ditch. You need somebody who can take you out of the ditch, who can help you come out of the ditch, who gives you hope and says it's doable. So you need that elder, counselor, somebody who knows how to help you get there. And so I'd say counselor, small group where you're having the environment of seeing you're not alone, and then grow, pursue God in your spiritual walk, and I'll pursue healthy relationships, which we can spend hours on. Is that
Yeah.
we need healthy relationships. If you don't mind, I'll take a quick side thing here, Jason, just to say
Yeah. Do it.
that when if you think about what I was looking for at 6, was someone to show me attention and affirmation, not sex. So the idea that my need was affirmation, my need was
Yeah.
to someone show that they cared, that I was valued, that I was important, that I was significant, and to be loved and to be accepted. Those are the needs. But my needs got sexualized. So I started pursuing sex to meet those needs. And
Yeah.
sex doesn't meet any of those needs. And so I'm short circuiting my needs by numbing them out rather than meeting them. So being able to separate out the sex part so that you can actually learn what are your needs and what are healthy strategies to meet those needs. And the number
Yeah.
one
That's
need,
great.
number one need, no matter who you are, male, female, doesn't matter, is relationship. And so I'm going to use the word intimacy. Intimacy. To see deep into my soul, to see me fully, and to love me in the midst of that, to accept me, to be known and to be loved. That's our number one need. Then nothing
It's awesome.
replaces it.
Yeah. Brene Brown, she did this TED talk on vulnerability. And she gives like 4 steps to building real connection. And her first step is courage. And
Yep.
her definition for courage is the ability to tell your story with your whole heart, being
Yep.
willing to bear your imperfections.
Yep.
And it's such a powerful, gosh, it was one of the most powerful definitions I've ever heard in reference to building relationship, because if you can't share your story with your whole heart and bear your imperfections, then you can't actually be in a real deep relationship.
Right.
And so many of us are stuck living unfulfilled with our needs not being met, simply because you still think you still have shame about your story.
Yeah.
You still have shame about your past. And more importantly, that shame is deciding for you how vulnerable, how honest, how authentic
Yep.
you're living in your relationships. And therefore, you're the poser, right? Like, you're only showing and sharing pieces of your life that are pretty enough to share. And you're never allowing anyone into your pain. And man, it's one of the most, it takes, I mean, why she says courage, right? Is this, the step is because it takes so much courage.
It does.
Like, I think guys do understand, but it takes so much courage to begin to reconcile the things that you've done wrong,
Yes.
the things that you're ashamed of, to confront them, and then to be able to unfold those for the world to see, the important world, your
Sure.
world.
Sure.
But that is, to me, like, that's the first step to really breaking the chain
Yeah.
in your life.
Amen.
Is I'm now willing to face what I've done first with God, right? Like, I'm willing to go to God, but a lot of people stay there. And I think this is a trap for men, is they go to God because he already knows, and they share everything because he'll never leave us or forsake us. But then they never do that with people.
Right.
And the truth is that God isn't all you need. Like, Adam and Eve are walking in the garden, or Adam's walking in the garden with God, and God goes, this isn't enough. You need a helpmate. You need a soulmate. You need a partner. You need companionship. And so, again, like, I think a lot of guys resort back to, I need to read the Bible more. I need to pray more. I need to talk to God more. And those things you can't discount, for sure. But if you don't actually come in and bare your soul before the people that are most important to you, then you're still in a prison. You're not out of the prison. You're still locked up into a prison. And I just want to make that really clear, because that's a missing link for a lot of guys. That's a missing step, is they're doing honesty and vulnerability with God, but they're not doing it with their friends. And therefore, we still have shame ruling and running our life. And shame always leads us back to the cycle again.
Yep.
Right?
It sure does.
Wouldn't you agree with that, Gene?
I totally agree. And Jason, you said it very well. You articulated it well. Uh, and that the level that I'm open is the level that I experience God. And so, because if I'm going to be in a relationship with God, then I got to be in the light, because He is light. And so
Yep.
I'm the one determining how close I get to God, because I'm afraid of the light. I'm afraid of what it will reveal. But then it's the next step is you love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and then you love your neighbor as yourself, and hear that are yourself. So you really can't love others until you actually address your own shame, your own, how bad I am. Because when you
Yeah.
see, you can't break that without getting that out in the open, because you actually get to test that with other brothers when you say, okay, here's my story. And how are you going to really know and experience grace unless you experience it through the hands and feet that are supposed to give His grace? So
Yeah.
I can't taste real relationship the way God designed it until I'm in the light, because then I can actually taste the grace that I need. I can actually taste the acceptance I need. So redemption gets played out in how I walk that out with you, not just with God.
Yeah.
It's not
definitely.
it's not an either or. It's both. And
Yeah.
so it's a beautiful thing what you're saying, Jason. But I think, the fear is, and it comes back to how shame plays in our lives. As long as shame is sitting there, and how do I know shame's sitting there? Shame is sitting there because when I look at shame, I'm seeing that I hide, or I'm ducking and diving, or there's parts of me that's unacceptable. There's parts of me that I just can't discuss because the cross, and we don't realize we're saying this, we're almost saying it's bigger than the cross. We're saying this
Yeah.
is too much. And the reality is that there's nothing larger, nothing greater than the cross. The cross came to redeem all, not some, not part, but all. And so I'm the one that determines how it gets done. The courage, like you have said, to step forward and say, okay, here it is, good, bad, and ugly.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
do that not only with God, but with others.
Yeah. It's so good. I think so many guys try to use willpower, um, and even discipline to stay free and to get
Yeah,
out of pornography and other
yeah,
substances as well, addictions as well. But the truth is, all that stuff, is fruitless because eventually, it builds up so much that you can't be disciplined enough, and you can't use enough willpower, and your discipline and your willpower fail you. That's why you can gut it out for 6 months, or you can gut it out for 8 months or 3 months, and you think you're good, but then you fall back, and that relapse is happening because you don't have an ecosystem that's built up to meet your needs, and you don't fully understand
exactly.
the the addiction. And so it's so helpful, for a guy to check his ego at the door, to humble himself, and to start off by going, man, I don't know what I'm doing. I always encourage guys, like, if you're struggling with an addiction, don't try to solve it on your own. If you could have solved it on your own, you already would have,
Yeah,
right? Like, can we all just agree on that?
yeah,
Because everyone's been struggling with it for so long, and they try, you've already tried. So to me, it's like, if you want the cheat code, man, get connected to somebody
yep,
that, like somebody like Gene, get connected to Gene, who has a program, or get connected to whatever, Shasta Blue Sky, or,
right,
go find a therapist that can actually help you to understand how you got here,
right.
understand what you need to do to heal, and put your money where your mouth is. If you say, this is the last time that I want to do this, well, it's going to cost you, it's going to cost you time, effort, and energy, but probably some money, but it's going to save your life. And that's the truth. Is, again, I do think that, um, addiction is such a complicated thing. It's not complicated to understand, but it really is complicated to unravel it, because of how it's so, it's the way that you think, it's your behaviors, it's your habits, it's, interwoven throughout your whole life. And so it's such a complex thing that I really do think, if you've been struggling with an addiction for a long time, you got to quit playing games and get really serious, and go all in, and say, man, this is the last year that I, consume. This is the last year, and actually go all in. It, yeah, because
Yeah,
I've never, like, yeah, I don't often say that on the podcast, but I really do feel like it's true. Too many guys are trying to still solve it on their own. And it's one thing if you don't have a full blown addiction, but if you do, you just got to you got to actually take action and really work hard with someone who knows how to help you. Gene, do you have some resources that for that?
yes. I mean, we could have people come to the website. I can send them worksheets. I can send them articles that I've written. If they want to attend a workshop or a conference or a retreat, or they want to do one-on-one counseling online, we do that as well. So all that is at authenticrelationshipsint.com, and they can just do that, or they can call me. Or I don't have any problem you putting out my phone number, um, so we can help in any way, shape, or form. Plus, we can actually help you find local resources. And the key in this is people finding a place that they can plug in and get
Yeah.
community, like you're doing here, Jason. You're putting a lifeline out there, and it's such an important thing to do. You're making it right, good for and safe for guys to actually think about this and to actually, what is that next step? Find somebody that you can talk to. Find that safe place to open up your heart and let someone come alongside you. Don't do this alone. We're never meant to do it alone.
Yeah, it's incredible. Your story is such a story of tragedy and hope. And I love, I love so much that you're courageous enough to share, you just gave all of us a gift, and that really is your story. And what a hard thing to do. Cause there's so much darkness in it. But there's so much light in life. And so I just
yeah,
want to challenge you, man, take the life that Gene has just imparted to you, like that man imparted to him, and do something with that. Do something with the hope that you feel today. If you're struggling and you're starting to feel like, okay, if he can get well, so far gone, made so many mistakes, so much trauma in his life. If he can actually get well and whole,
right.
so can I. And use that momentum and motivation to take your next step. Gene, thank you so much for coming on today, man. You're such a gift. I really, really appreciate you.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity to have a conversation about this. And any other time you want to, we can take it up any further and talk a little deeper if you want. But thank you for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Gene. All right, BraveCo man. That's this week's podcast. Listen, if it blessed you, would you share the podcast? Also subscribe and leave a comment if you want. All that stuff really helps us to grow. Otherwise, I will see you next week. Stay brave, man. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to the BraveCo podcast. If you like this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, leave us a great comment. And if you like this episode in particular, share it with your friends and family. That helps us to spread the word. Guys, stay brave. We'll see you next week.